although she's not here. Dr. Arthur Levine.
Yes. The two that I would support are the two that, in fact, we submitted. And I apologize for having been a couple of days late in getting them in. But I do want to point out, because I think this was discussed this morning, that there was nothing that has ever precluded the committee members themselves adding other ideas if they felt they had substance. And I was pleased already to hear that there is support for the notion of pharmacogenomics. And now I want to talk a little bit about aging, which would be the second theme that I would support. We spend a lot of money and we invest a great deal of thought and effort in exploring diseases that we get as we become older. And in fact, most of the health burden in this country, if not the world, and most of the economic cost of that burden relates to the diseases that we get as we age. But what we're missing is a true insight at an environmental and molecular level of the quality of life when we age to begin with, because the diseases are all secondary. What's primary is the biology of aging and the biology of longevity. So, for example, we know that there probably are clear genetic differences between people who look old and function old physiologically in their 60s and other people who are still thriving and going to work every day in their 80s and 90s. So that's a very broad spectrum. And we don't, although we have a hint at genetic differences, we're far from really understanding that difference and manipulating it if we can, not to make people live longer, but to have a far better quality of life as they age than they may otherwise have. In other words, the more we understand about the environmental and the genetic roots of the biology of aging, the better we're positioned to prevent the diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer that occur simply as a consequence of our getting older. So those are the two themes that I would propose. With regard to cancer, although the percentile success rate at the NIH is now 17% and a little less than that for the NCI, the proposed appropriation for this coming fiscal year is a very good one, a very healthy one. We just hope that it's endorsed by the president. But assuming that will happen, there's plenty of money available for the kinds of studies that have been described with regard to cancer. And I would also point out that there's even a better technology for true ultrastructural interrogation of single cancer cells than cryo-electron microscopy. It's tomographic cryo-electron microscopy, which is why we have invested heavily in such an apparatus. So even having made that investment and wishing that I could get a return on my investment, I wouldn't expect anyone other than the federal government to support that research. Mm-hmm. As far as vaccines go, I see this as a societal issue, not as a research issue. When we have an anti-vax movement in this country and notable people, including at one point our president, aligning themselves with the anti-vax movement, then we're talking about a profound societal, ethical, and political issue, not a research issue.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. Dr. Masucci.
Hi, Dr. Levine, I couldn't agree more with your statement about the vaccine issue. Thank you for sharing that perspective. My preference changed as a result of these presentations, so I thought I might offer that comment simply because it does speak to why it's important to actually hear how it is people are conceiving of the concept that they're presenting. So initially, I was focused in on the cardiometabolic disease priority for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that, we understand that there is this conflation of, again, I'm not an MD, so you'll have to forgive me that I'm not speaking in those terms, but there's a conflation of different conditions that are all, I guess, co-present in an individual, and I think that was what I initially thought would be coming out of that. But in the end of the day, I'm more convinced by the aging and related to chronic disease theme. I think it addresses the needs of a very large and growing set of concerns. I think that if we can back up to a broader approach to it than the specific research that was presented, so really thinking about the basic biology of aging, which I thought that diagram was very helpful, and if we write that RFA in a way so as to be a bigger tent, which is kind of the comments that I was getting at in my question related to that theme, then I would be supportive of it. But I think the devil would be in that detail to make sure that the way the concept is written is broad enough to ensure that we have the ability to evaluate a diverse array of research topics on that theme. My second choice is the pharmacogenomic one. But I have another question related to that, which we don't need to discuss right at this moment, but I think would need to be better addressed. I thought I heard you say, Dr. Levine, that drug development is not a part of this, and we're not allowed to divert funds to that. So it would be just clinical. And yet I do think that some of the really important work to be done in this area might be in the drug discovery realm. So I don't know if we want to comment on that, but I'm just leaving it there as a question that I have. Because I think, yeah, go ahead.
So I guess what I meant to say, I guess if there was one of our esteemed academic institutions, which you all represent, and then there are others, if their pharmacology department was interested in drug development, that could be part of it. But we're not subsidizing work by Merck and Glasgow.
Okay, I see.
So that a pharma company cannot submit an RFA.
Okay, that helps explain, because we have a very well-known drug development group who I think would have an awful lot to contribute if you were to think about a more, translational program as opposed to a clinical program. And so that's the part I wasn't sure about on that one. If it ends up being more clinical in focus, then we would be less interested. But if there's a basic research component that we can add, or let me back up, a more translational component where we can use our drug development group, then we would be interested in that one as well.
So I'm open to other thoughts. My opinion would be I would be very open to translational research. I just would not be open to big pharma applying for RFAs because they have their own money.
Yeah, we understand.
May I add a comment? This is Art Levine.
Yes.
If in fact, as part of this theme, we are exploring the genetics of how one responds with safety and efficacy to a given drug, and we hit upon a hitherto unknown genetic variant, it may well lead us to identifying even an existing drug that we haven't thought of before. For example, Mike Parmachuk knows well, but he has a faculty member with Castleman's disease. This is a remarkable story, the subject of a book about to come out, who in fact discovered the cause of his own disease and has not only seemingly cured himself of an otherwise lethal disease, but has had a huge impact on others with this rare disease as well. The point being that he used an off-the-shelf drug ordinarily used for organ transplantation to now cure a multicentric lymphoma. Mike, is that a correct
Yeah, that's
comment?
As usual. I wish they had quoted you in the New York Times review of this book, but it's an amazing read, and he's an amazing kid, actually. He's a kid just for the group just out of interest. This actually started when he was in medical school. And if you read the book or see him on TV, he literally was in the intensive care unit, given his last rites, almost dying 5 different times. And he just dedicated his life to it, and remarkably, with some resources and helps, identified a pathway, took an off-the-shelf drug that was already out there, and he's been in remission for 5 years. It's an incredible, but the kid actually is still doing full-time research, came right out of medical school to do it. He's very impressive.
So in any case, just to distill this, the fact of the matter is that there's nothing about a pharmacogenomics theme that would preclude us from the possibility of leading toward drug discovery and drug development.
That's very helpful. So maybe, Dr. Levine, you just elevated my interest in that particular theme. Either one of the two that we've discussed would be fine with Temple University.
Thank you. Dr. Parmacek.
Yeah, let me sort of take some off the table from my standpoint. First, I would agree with the comments relating to vaccine coverage. I mean, we know the science. It's a social policy issue, and it's a travesty, but it is what it is, and I don't think that's what I would support. I think that the pharmacogenomic priority I love and I favor, and I think a great deal will come of it. But then I'm stuck between two, and I'm going back and forth. Let me first talk about the aging priority. I really conceptually like the idea of studying the biology of aging. This has been a really tough thing to get your hands around, and it's very, very broad. There are companies, Calico being the leading company that's funded by Google, which was founded to do just this. And while a lot of their stuff is not public at this point in time, I do think that they are likely to make headroads there. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't do it in academia either. But I would say that writing this RFA, if we go with it, we have to be cautious. So for instance, are we going to accept proposals on Alzheimer's disease, prevention and/or therapy of Alzheimer's disease? That's not what I heard we want to do, and we've had that priority before recently. So we're going to have to exclude age-related diseases, but focus on the biology and pathology, if you will, of aging. And that's, that gets into some pretty broad subjects like we heard about, like immunology and whatever. So getting our hands around that RFA, while I have a great deal of interest in it, I think will require some really critical thinking in terms of how we craft that RFA. The other area which I think I haven't heard anyone support lately is the cardiometabolic priority. And I am a cardiologist, and that's not why I'm supporting it. The reason I support it is because of the emerging science of nutrition. And I think that, we've all heard what the preferred diets are from the American Heart Association, and those things, while they change a little bit now and then, there's some real science now being introduced into nutritional science. And I think I heard some reference earlier on in terms of the way that nutrition alters the microbiome, or the microbiome alters the nutrients. There's a lot going forward. A question as simple as what is an ideal diet for a patient recovering from surgery? We struggle with that. And there are ways to measure that in ways we could never measure that before. Diabetes, we again have fallen back on most of the same dietary recommendations we've had for 25 years, but the science has not really, there are new scientific ways to look at what are idealized environments for, nutrition for diabetic patients. So from a nutritional science standpoint, focusing on that, I would be supportive of that amongst the priorities. And those are so I'm sort of struggling between the three. Actually, I love pharmacogenetics, and the other two I'm going back and forth in my mind on.
All right, so if you were going to pick two.
Oh, okay, you're going to make me do it, huh?
I am, I'm tough.
Yeah, that's all right. So I'm taking pharmacogenomics as my first draft choice. My second, boy, I am really on the fence. If we could craft the aging RFA to capture the biology and pathology of aging and those processes, and exclude research focused solely on aging-related disease prevention, and it's so hard to separate those, I would go with that. I just think it's going to be really, really hard to do it. So I'll throw that out as a challenge. I'll go with that as my second choice, but I think we have to be very critical about how we write that.
So, Mike, this is Art. May I accept the challenge?
You may accept the challenge. Why am I not surprised?
So, Dr. Levine, this is Peter Tombros.
Yes.
I would just like to ask our scientists. It does seem to me that to Dr. Parmachek's point, writing the RFP for the geriatric type studies that have been presented here, I mean, it seems to me that if it's written appropriately, 3 of these particular studies could also apply. So I think how we craft that should be an opportunity to hit in a few areas and then end up trying to find the best kinds of research projects that in that broad space. Am I right about that, or is that just too broad?
So this is Art again. No, I don't think that's too broad at all. I think it can be done. There's enough information already. Here I have to disclose a conflict of interest because I myself am the senior author of a paper which will soon appear exploring the genetic variants that account for looking old when we're young and looking young when we're old.
Good for you, Art.
So the point, only an old person could author such a paper. So the point I want to make is I think this can be done, and I'd like to have a shot at it if the committee agrees.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. Mr. Tombros, do you have your choices?
So I was just going to say that'll be one of my choices, and certainly pharmacogenomics is something that even I'm aware of. So I would vote for that.
Thank you. Senator?
I was struck by the fact that a lot of these presented the problems, but were very unclear as to what they thought was the solution. Having said that, I do understand, even though I'm intrigued by the vaccine issue, it's not a research issue. I've been torn between the two, the genes, environment, and age-related chronic diseases and the gerioscience. There's a lot of similarities. I guess, can they ever be combined, or is that impossible?
I don't know if those two could be combined. One was more, I guess, genes and chronic illnesses, possibly.
Age-related chronic illness, but they were age-related chronic disease.
Right.
Well, I would point out we did have a gene environment theme, I believe, in the past. And I did think, by the way, Dr. Levine, it was very helpful that you had laid out the timeline of all of the prior RFPs.
Thank you. So yes, we have had that in the not so distant past. So I have written those down so I can find it. We had gene environment interactions in 06-07. We had vaccine development in 06-07. We had autism in 08-09. Regenerative medicine in 07-08. Cancer in 11-12. Translational genomics in 11-12. So, for your information.
So, in other words, we're going to have to do one or the other. Okay. the age-related chronic disease, I do like that one. Since we did autism not too long ago, even though I think there's a lot more research needs to be done on that, then I would go with the testing on medication outcomes with the pharmacogenomic testing.
Okay. So finally for mine, so I've gone back and forth a lot. I actually, it won't get chosen, but I do think that the vaccine would be really interesting because of what we struggle with from a public health perspective. I think it would be different type of research. It would be public health research, behavioral science research. It's not bench research, or even specific clinical medicine research. So that would be one of mine. And in terms of the cancer, I'm just wondering about the cancer moonshot and the money coming through 21st Century Cures and whether that would be funding more of that. And the pharmacogenetic testing would be my second. The geroscience I find fascinating. I guess I shared some of the other people's concerns about it maybe being very basic science in terms of aging, and we're looking for clinical outcomes. But so I guess mine would be vaccines and pharmacogenetic testing. So I think that we can knock out some. So I think we're knocking out cardiometabolic diseases.
So yes, just a question. I just want to go back and
further discussion.
Yeah, I know we're probably not going to pick it, but I think Mike Parmasak, and I'm a cardiologist as well,
right,
made some very important points about new science of nutrition and how important it is on a simplified level with if you will, impactful outcomes. So, I understand where the bandwagon's going here, but we should not forget about the opportunity of a simple topic that has a major impact on an awful lot of people with new science that can be applicable. So just a cry in the I'm the single tree in the forest. I just wanted to bring that up.
So Dr. Davis, that was part of my question, though. It appears to me that could be included in the way in one of the two that we're talking about now is geriatric medicine.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah, it may be tough. I think it may be tough to do that with the amount of money that we have in terms of splitting the topic. Is my concern.
Would you like to change your vote?
Yeah, I'll
You'll vote for that
I'll vote for the nutrition for medical science for me
instead of
my second one, which was cancer.
Okay.
Dr. Levine, our chairperson, if I could just make a suggestion.
Sure.
I think to use Derek's expression, you can see where the train is going generally. I'd like to suggest that for those that we're struggling with, particularly the first one, prevention and management of cardiometabolic disease, and clearly there was a big focus on nutrition, and those points are so important in so many populations and subpopulations. I would suggest that if it is not a selection in this go-around, that we reconsider it in the next go-around.
Sure. That's fine.
Well, Dr. Levine, this is Peter again, wouldn't that still qualify for what we're talking about? I mean, Dr. Parmachek's point about trying to broaden it in a way that would let three of our proposals still fit in.
Well, I think so that's one question that the committee has to decide. In the past, long time ago, there were two. You would choose two priorities. In the last number of years, the committee has chosen one, and there's the money is about 11 million plus. 11 million. 11 million plus would be the funding. And I worry that if you have more than one priority, you're not going to be giving that much money. So, if you have, usually we have chosen 3 winners. Is that correct? 2 to 3 winners?
Yeah, because it's $4 million.
So they would get somewhere between 3.5 and 4 million apiece. If you have 2 categories and 2 or 3 winners apiece, now you're talking about $1 or $2 million, which doesn't go as far as it used to. So in the last,
I'm not articulating this, I think, properly. I'm not advocating that we expand the number of choices. It just struck me that besides the pharmacogenomics, when you talk about aging and you talk about looking at geriatric medicine, it seemed to me that the number 1 study, which I really think is powerful, could still apply for those monies.
So I'm going to ask Dr. Art Levine to comment on that, because you are the person that has proposed the geroscience.
Well, once again, the notion that I want to propose to my colleagues is that the one area that we haven't touched upon at all, as you look through the list of themes that have been supported earlier, is the biology of aging. And everything we're talking about here really does relate to the fact that most of our health burden and the healthcare economy burden occurs as we become older. And therefore, our ultimate goal ought to be to try to understand whether we can get enough insight into this broad spectrum of aging biology such that we can help people to have better lives, not to live longer, but to improve the quality of their lives. And if we can do that, then we can regard cancer, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease at all as secondary to the insight we gain with regard to the biology of aging. And if we're going to go with only one theme, we might even want to think about how our sensitivity and susceptibility to drugs, their safety and efficacy, may change as we age, again, as a consequence of the biology of aging.
So this is Dr. O'Donnell. Just a quick question. Are we choosing 1 or 2?
Well, I think that's up to the committee. In the last number of years, we have chosen 1: Alzheimer's, opioids, traumatic brain injury, healthcare innovation, primarily big data. The CBD was added, but in the years past, starting around 2000, for 12, there were usually 2 choices. I'm just saying that if you have 2 topics, and each topic has 2 or 3 winners, and there's a total of less than $12 million that we're distributing. Depends on, it's not just my decision, it depends on how much money you want to give the winners, right? So do you want to give them almost 4, or do you want to give them less than 2? That's the question.
Right.
So if you're going to give them 3.5 to 4, my recommendation would be pick 1 topic. If you're content with giving 3 winners essentially $1.5 million, that's less research, but that can be done. It's really up to the committee.
And Dr.
So I would.
Levine, I'm sorry. I would just one more minor clarification. When you say 3 winners, are we picking a number of winners in each topic, or are we choosing 1 winner in each topic?
Well, in the past, there have been this year. So for opioids, there were 3 winners under opioids. Under TBI, there were 3 winners. Under healthcare innovation, 1 winner.
They were done together, but with 2 years of funding.
All right.
Yes.
For big data, 3. So again, that depends on the quality of the proposals and how they're chosen.
This is Michelle from Temple. I strongly would urge my colleagues that 1 theme is the best way to go for a number of practical reasons. Along with what I think are perhaps some reasons that pertain to the public interest. From a practical standpoint, as we all know, the actual implementation of this program, it takes a lot of time and effort to get people to get their proposals together out of the door, and doing that times 2 themes is, substantially harder than it is to do it times 1 theme. And I think it affects the quality of the proposals, because everybody ends up kind of hedging their bets. And so we would have, I'm sure you all have the same thing at your home institutions. You can tell me if I'm wrong. The same people who would apply to theme 1 would apply to theme 2, many of them. And so then instead of getting, a better quality proposal on a more defined theme, you're going to get everybody sort of scrambling to try to respond to both. But I also think that the public's interest is better served by having the state invest in a deeper dive on a particular topic that 3 different teams are approaching, obviously in different ways. Because I think what we get out of it as Pennsylvania is, you now have essentially seeded 3 cohorts of researchers who are doing work. You have a better chance of covering the state as a whole by doing that. So just from a programmatic standpoint, I'm with you, Dr. Levine, but those are the reasons why I'm with you on that particular recommendation.
So for that, I just worry that if we spread no matter what I can do, you're going to have approximately 11 point something million dollars. So it depends on how you want to cut the pie, but in this day and age, $1.4 million is not going to go all that far, and so I worry that it won't produce the results that we want to produce. And so if you double or more than double the money. So my recommendation, although it's not my decision, it's the committee's decision, would be to go with 1 choice.
So if I could just pick up on that, I agree that based on everything that Dr. Masucci and others have said, I think and you, Madam Secretary, I think we should go with 1. I think it should be the geroscience approach. I take Mike Parmachek's words seriously, and I get where he's going with this. It can't be disease specific. It's got to reach. It's got to dig deep and look at a very biological level. What are the phenomena of aging that drive diseases across a disease age spectrum? And I have confidence, especially after Dr. Levine told us what he's working on, that he can put something together. I would also urge that we not try to do combinations. I think it's pretzel twisting, trying to fit things in that don't really fit in. So I'm comfortable with going with 1, with going with that topic, with ensuring that it's written in such a way that we're going to get the kinds of proposals that we want that are not disease specific, but rather biologically focused, and deliver the deep dive that Dr. Masucci mentions, and produces some real value. And especially given the fact that the Commonwealth, it's either the top or one of the top aging states in the country. I think it's a good investment.
So if I might distill our discussion, it seems that there are 2 topics that have risen to the top: the geroscience and the pharmacogenetic testing. And so if we're going to pick one, we need to vote between those 2. Does anybody have a problem with taking those 2 out of bringing those to the top of the list and then doing a vote? Does anybody want to do anything differently? Dwight?
I'm in favor.
Is everybody okay? Anybody that's opposed of taking those 2 topics out and then doing a vote, let me know. Because they seem to be the ones that everyone seems to be talking about, and the others, although very excellent goals, seem to have fallen a little bit to the wayside, although it's hard to say I don't support cardiometabolic disease research, but of course we support that. But in terms of this voting, does everyone agree that we're going to do 1 topic and those are the 2 top vote getters? Great.
Agree.
Okay.
Agree.
So let's go reverse. Pat Vance, which choice would you make, Senator?
I think the the unlocking the secrets of aging.
Okay. Mr. Tombros.
Yes, so I would go with the same, no problem. But again, I don't understand why the cardiovascular study wouldn't fall into that.
Well, that would be up to, I guess, probably Dr. Art Levine in terms of how he writes up his proposal.
Exactly. And so I thought I heard that it could be done.
Well, once again, I think the challenge here is for us to gain insight into what happens to us as we get older that makes it increasingly likely for us to develop cardiovascular disease, Alzheimer's, cancer at all. But the fundamental issue is not those diseases per se. It's the process by which we age to begin with, and why that changes so much between different members of our species. Why is it harder for minorities than for whites? Why may it be harder for people in rural areas rather than urban areas? Why does it differ from one culture to another, one ethnicity to another? These are all questions that relate to the fundamental biology of aging and how the environment and our genes play on that biology. So I wouldn't exclude anything.
Yeah. Okay. I will. I think I understand.
So you're voting for geroscience?
Yes.
All right. And next we have Dr. Parmacek.
So my concerns still relate to the actual wording of this thing, but I actually, listening to what Art just said, my even greater concern is how a review panel is going to be able to cover the breadth of what might roll in if we go with geroaging. But that will be their issue, I guess. But it will be a challenging issue because some of those things that Art just described are in very, very different fields and will require different expertise. That being said, it is sort of more intriguing, and we do have a lot of elderly individuals in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, I think amongst the highest in the country.
And if there is,
so, what's that?
I said on the committee also.
I wasn't going to go there, Art. Anyway, I was specific. When you said you were conflicted, I didn't know where you were going with that one. That being said, so I guess I'll go with it, though I do think we should look very carefully at Art's draft of this thing and have, perhaps if there's concerns following that we have a quick follow-up either via conference call or email to clean it up if people have concerns.
Fair enough. Dr. O'Donnell.
I agree with everything that Mike just said. I think that it will be challenging. I think that Art will meet and manage the challenge, and I do think it's a good idea to come back and revisit the written draft, which we always do anyway. So I think we're headed in the right direction on this.
Thank you. Dr. Masucci.
Well, my vote is for the pharmacogenomic project, but I'm very supportive of this other direction if that's what we all decide. I just think that there's really innovative science to be had in that topic, and the prospect of all of us kind of devoting resources to that topic, I think, would yield some very important outcomes on a practical and translational level. So I'm going to give that one the edge, but I have confidence in Dr. Levine to be able to help us get the RFP correct if we decide to go with the age-related chronic diseases topic.
Thank you. Dr. Arthur Levine.
I don't have any comment other than that I need to know what the deadline will be for me.
Well, which one do you vote for, sir? We're not done yet. Do you vote for geroscience or pharmacogenomics?
Well, I prefer to call it the biology of aging than geroscience, but yes,
Fine.
that's what I would vote for.
Okay. And Dr. Davis?
I have been beaten into submission. I will go with neuroscience.
All right, Dr. Davis goes with geroscience. I will go with geroscience, so geroscience wins. There you go.
And if I could just...
What's my deadline?
Tomorrow. Penny, what's the deadline?
I would say, how long does he feel he needs?
How long do you need, Dr. Levine?
Well, I'd like to have a month if I can have it.
You have a month. Very good. Someone else had a comment?
I was just going to mention that I thought, never mind, I think we covered it. I just have confidence that that Dr. Levine's going to produce something that is going to work and will satisfy a lot of the things that we've talked about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and
I think we all share that confidence. Excuse me?
I liked Art's title better.
I do too.
Okay. Biology of aging.
The
Yeah, we'll go
biology
with
of
that.
aging. I thought that was a much better title.
He's right.
Yeah, I agree.
It's the title.
So, Dr. Levine, I have one side issue that came up earlier that I feel I need to mention, and that is, would no commercial companies be eligible to apply for these grants? I think, depending on that, I think some of our legislators might be disappointed that we were excluding research being done in small Pennsylvania startups.
Well, that's an interesting question. I'm looking to our attorney.
Well, I mean, the statute provides exactly who is eligible as far as institutions.
What does it say?
Nonprofits in Pennsylvania, institutions of higher nonprofits in Pennsylvania that do research, institutions of higher learning, and I think there's a third one. Looking for this. Yes, and then the establishments under the County Municipal Health Department. Established under the Act.
Did you all hear that? It's in the act, sir.
So that rules out. I couldn't hear it very clearly, so I just need a yes or no.
The answer is no, sir.
If I could please weigh in on this, this is Dr. O'Donnell. In the earliest days of this board, and I would ask council to just maybe go back and look at the original legislation and whether or not there were any amendments that changed the original legislation to eliminate the prospect of startups and companies applying. We did have companies applying. There was one instance very early on in which a company was funded, but there was only one instance that I can recall in my earlier tenure on this board. But I do believe, to Peter's very good point, that there are members of the legislature that are looking to see something happen along these lines. And so unless there was an amendment to the original legislation that prohibits companies from applying, I believe that companies are permitted to apply. And I do remember one such company actually getting an award. I don't remember when it was, but it was a long, long time ago.
And that is true, and some still do. They are required to be nonprofit entities that do research.
No, I was actually speaking of for-profit entities that are
Should not do that.
Well, I'm just pointing out that it did happen, and whether or not that's changed is something for council to determine, I think.
But we
I
can speak that now.
Yeah, I thought it was because we had at one point the dual track and there was a commercialization theme that particular year, which was the only time we've ever had that, if I recall correctly.
With a non-formula commercialization.
Correct.
Once.
I mean, can you read from the act?
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. institutions are defined as nonprofit entity that conducts research, a hospital that conducts research established under the Healthcare Facilities Act, an institution of higher education that conducts research. They are the institutions that are eligible for funding under the statute. And again, also the local county municipal organization created under Act 315, or a person is the other part. But as far as for-profit entities, that is
I think it was for a person. I think that's where it landed.
okay. Then if that is fell within that category, then that's within the confines of the statute. Yes.
Right.
I don't remember that one specifically, but Penny seems to.
Sounds like a for-profit company cannot apply.
That is correct.
So I guess if you strongly disagree, then give us an email and we'll review it.
I'm happy to send an email. I would also just point out that institutions of higher learning, including all of our institutions, are all starting for-profit companies or developing things that potentially have a commercialization aspect. So there's a crossover there as well.
Right, but your academic institutions themselves are not for profit. They might spin off a for-profit company, but they are not for profit.
Quite right. Yeah, agreed.
I think that's my gut is that's inherently different. If Pitt or Penn State or Temple spins off, or Jefferson spins off a for-profit company, this does. But Pitt and Penn State and Penn and Temple and Jefferson and I don't know are all still not-for-profit academic institutions. I think that's different than Merck applying. A small for-profit, in that area, that seed area of Pittsburgh. It's still a for-profit company. So my gut is no. That seems to be what the legislation says, although, if you feel different, then send us an email and we'll look at it.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
Great.
So, Dr. Levine, I agree. It sounds like the answer is no. I just want to make you aware that there are a lot of legislators who don't realize that. So in some way, or I think it would just be good to make sure they know that, so they don't waste their time trying to get funding through this mechanism.
Also, now, of course, the legislature can always change the act, right? There's an act of the legislature, so if they feel that strongly about it, they can change the act.
Well, of course, I just wanted them. See, some of them have these small companies in their jurisdictions, and they're, looking for ways to help them get funding. So a lot of them point to this program.
Yep. And that has come up before, where we have had for-profit companies come to legislators and even the governor's office looking for cures money, and the answer has been no, that they have to find their funding in a different manner, but that they can't do it through the cures funding. And so we have actually told a number of different political bodies that point.
Excellent. Thank you.
We appreciate, Dr. Levine, that you have done that. I think it's important to point out, that last year when there was legislation to create the spinal cord carve-out from the PA-CURE non-formula allocation, many of us pointed out the concerns that we have about whittling away at what's already not a very large pool of dollars to support research. There's very little investment in research from the state budget, and of course PA-CURE dollars are pass-through dollars. They're not really state dollars either. So I would just make a pitch for doing our very best to keep focused on what the goal of this source of funding is as a basis for supporting Pennsylvania being able to have a small resource, relatively speaking, to maintain its prominence in biomedical research and position it to be able to go grab those federal dollars that, of course, we're always chasing. Not to say that I don't believe in commercialization. I mean, I run commercialization at my university, so I normally would be a very big advocate for that. But we really do value that this program exists as it's currently structured.
I agree 100%. And again, as we notice any rumblings in the legislature about anything that has to do with cures, we will let you know.
Thank you.